Hello and welcome back, everyone. Another episode of Irreplaceable Truths. I have a very, very motivational guest today. I, I, I'm very excited that our paths crossed because of my work with Atlas and being on the board. This veterinarian is stories has to be told. She practices in Ohio. Not only is she a veterinarian, but she also owns a dog training facility called One Smart Dog, which specializes non-adverse science-based dog training. She likes to blend veterinary care with positive reinforcement training, I guess you could say. She's a community advocate. She's an educator and a speaker. She's been the past president of the Ohio Veterinary Licensing Board. I just found out she's also involved in the admissions board at the veterinary school at Ohio State University. She is very big in the service dog community when it comes to positive reinforcement training. But most importantly, she has overcome many, many barriers and has built and recently sold a very successful companion animal practice. I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Linda Randall. Linda, thank you so much for being here today. Your story, the second we talked, I told you how it has to be told.
You definitely did. And I'm always happy to tell it.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Where were you growing up?
Where what?
Where did you grow up?
Oh, where did I grow? I grew up in Connecticut. And it was a very small town in Connecticut. And we were the only Black family in that town. And I had a large family from both my mother's side and my father's side on different parts of the state. My father worked, interestingly enough, in a dairy farm. And as he was growing up and going through high school, and he was a pole vaulter and did a lot of sports. And so they were out in a very rural part of Connecticut. And that was a struggle because they were the only Black family in that area. And my mother grew up on the coast of Connecticut in the Fairfield County, and had a very interesting upbringing there. But when they got married, they decided to live in this small town, but nobody would sell them a house. And they finally found a house and property in the what they called at the time the Russian community. In retrospect, and when I go back through the notes, they were Ukrainian. And of course, that was post-World War II, and they had emigrated. And so I grew up going to Russian lessons and the folk dances and doing all of the things that the Russian Ukrainian kids were doing. And they did speak Russian, and they also spoke Ukrainian. And so I grew up speaking with them for many years, taking Russian lessons, not Ukrainian lessons. And so that was my upbringing in Connecticut.
So, where along the way did you decide, hey, working with animals is probably what I want to do for my future?
I've always wanted to work with animals. It's one of the things that if you look at pictures from my childhood, I'm always with a dog or with a horse or with chickens, because the farmer that rented our land, the Ukrainian farmer, had a chicken farm. And so I was always doing that. And I always was saying that I wanted to be a journalist or a veterinarian. Who knows where that came from, but that's what I always said. But I was continually told that I could not be a veterinarian. And when I was in high school, I really insisted that that's what I wanted to do. And I can remember the teachers taking me aside and saying, well, first of all, Linda, let's just talk about academics. You got thrown out of your biology class, which I did. But I was reinstated the next day. And you got a D in physics. You hate math. What makes you think that you're going to be able to be a veterinarian? And I said, I can do it. And then the next step was, well, you're female. Do you know there are very few female veterinarians? And at the time, that was absolutely true. And you're probably not going to get in because you're a woman. Okay. Then the next time they came, because I didn't stop saying I still wanted to be a veterinarian. So the next time they came to me, they sat me down in a room and they said, you're Black and you are not going to get in. So pick another profession. And I found a veterinarian in the Cincinnati area who let me go around with him. He did horses. And that's so I didn't work with him, but I shadowed him for quite a while. And that was an excellent experience. And so then I went to college. I'm an English literature and American history major. And when I graduated from college, I got a job teaching English literature at a private boarding school in Poughkeepsie, New York, Quaker school. I went to a Quaker college. And after 2 years into that, I answered an ad in the New York Times from Nigeria saying that they were hiring people who wanted to teach English in Nigeria. And I said, oh, I could do that. So I answered the ad, I got the job, and I went to Nigeria on a 3-year contract and taught English in a federal government girls' school in the middle of the country. And I loved it and I really enjoyed it, but I had to leave earlier than expected because there was a coup, a military coup. And so we escaped on the veritable last plane out that Americans could get on. And on my way back, I was on the plane and I thought, well, now what am I going to do? And I said, well, you want to be a veterinarian, right? And I thought, yeah. So I got out a piece of paper on the long flight back and I wrote down all the things I needed to do that I thought I needed to do to be a veterinarian. And when I landed, my mother met me at the airport. She said, Linda, guess what? I took a job in Ohio. And I said, oh, as a matter of fact, that's one of the universities that I'd like to look at for veterinary medicine. I looked at 5 universities and I got into all of them. And but I decided that I would go to the University of Cincinnati first. My mother was going to be located in Cincinnati, get all of my sciences, and I gave myself 18 months to do that because I had no sciences, no math. And I started it, and halfway through it, I realized I wasn't going to be able to get all of them because you had to take them sequentially, which I hadn't thought of. And they wouldn't let me jump over a class because it was at the right time. So I went over to Xavier University and I applied there and I got in and I got those classes there at the same time that I went to the University of Cincinnati because I wanted those classes and I wanted to get through this in 18 months. So I went to 2 universities and juggled their classes, got them all. And then there I was, and I applied and got into Ohio State. So that's, my mother went back to New York to move up in the company she was working for after living in Cincinnati for 2 years. And so was my career, and that's how I got into veterinary school.
Unbelievable story. So I'm stopping right there. I mean, what advice would you give to any young veterinarians who may feel discouraged or uncertain about their own paths in the field? Because you had to overcome all that, even a coup in Nigeria, to get to where you wanted to get to. Um, 2 different universities. You gave yourself 18 months to get in. I mean, what advice to any young person out there who wants to be a veterinarian, who thinks it's not possible because either they've been told or they believe they just can't do it?
I used to have some, in retrospect, possibly pat answers for that kind of question. And I think, first of all, there are no pat answers. You do have to believe in yourself somehow in order to pursue something that is going to take time. I remember when I said, it's going to take me 6 years to do this, 2 years to get in, and then 4 years of school. And I don't know if I really want to put that time into it. I had to work a full-time job while I went to college, to the 2 universities. I was still working. And she said, well, Linda, in 6 years, you can either be finishing up or you can be saying, well, it's the end of those 6 years and I didn't do it. But that time is going to pass, whether you attempt to do what you want to do or whether you don't. So her recommendation was to just start. And you never know where it's going to take. I took a very broken path. There was never any assurance that I was actually going to get to where I wanted to be, but the journey was really exhilarating to me because I met a lot of interesting people. A lot of things happened along the way that I didn't expect, but I enjoyed most of them. So I think that that's my recommendation, is that a lot of the professions that take a lot of time, money, and effort are ones that require a decision to actually forge ahead, but also a willingness to at any point say, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and to take another path. There are ways, or the window door idea is always there. And it can lead you in a direction that may not be what you thought it was going to be when you started, but may end up being something even better. And that's my recommendation. And again, I had a wise mother, so I'm going to use another one of her sayings, because she was always one of the people that would just look at me, say my name, and say what she had to say. Linda, it's not the decision you make, it's what you do with the decision you make. So make a decision and then work it. That's my advice. This isn't something you can go into just saying, oh, maybe. You go into it wholeheartedly and then accept what comes and change as you need to.
Yeah, it's not a career path, especially from the educational standpoint, throwing money aside. The educational standpoint is crazy enough. You know, you take in 20 to 25, 26 credit hours a semester. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of late nights. Um, just during the education part alone, I think 6 marriages broke up in divorce in the 4 years of school. Because the only people who will really realize what you're going through are people who are doing it with you or have already been through it. So no one realizes how much work it is. And I mean, you're absolutely correct. You go in full throttle. Full throttle, you can't let off the gas, because if you do, the, the education part alone will eat you up. Did you have any did you have any students drop out of your class? Do you remember?
I had a classmate that dropped out midway through the first year and then went to dental school. We had a suicide our first year, and every class in front of us also had suicides. I think one might have even had 2. And it was very difficult. One of my classmates had triplets our second or third year and had to take a gap year there, year off, and then but came back. It was yeah, we lost a lot of classmates for various reasons. It was not unexpected at that time. I think that we've learned a lot since on how to perhaps admit students that have more support. And one of the questions that I always ask when people come to me for mentorship or talking about veterinary medicine is one of the first questions I ask is, do you have support for this? It's just like now when you go into your doctor's appointments, how they always say, do you feel safe at home? Do you have anybody that's supportive of you in your life? And these are routine questions that they'll ask you. 4 people come into your room, your exam room, and 4 people are going to ask you the same question. And it's a really good question, even though it's kind of an annoying question sometimes, because that's what I'm starting to ask is, what is the support you have? This profession needs people who are not just dedicated to it, but have been surrounded by people who are dedicated to them and to their success. And we can't let that go.
Correct. They're dedicated, but they will never understand. Unless they're in it, they won't understand. So I can see, I just want to make sure that people understand that they're not going to get truly what's going on with you, but as long as you're there to just listen, go on a walk with you, maybe take you out to dinner, give you your space if you need it. Just that's the type of support I think you're trying to get at, correct?
Yes, that and as you said, the kind of support that perhaps does not offer solutions unless you're asking for them, which is a wise thing to follow in every friendship, is to listen and to ask reasonable questions, accept the answers, and ask them what they need. And if you can supply it, do so. And if you can't, gently say so, but help them find a place or a person who can. And let me tell you, the number of people who said, well, I don't need a therapist, I'm gonna say, yeah, you do. People that's not a bad thing. If you don't have the friendship or the family support, get professional support, because it's that important to be able to go through school with some form of growth and knowing yourself, because once you're out of school and you don't have professors supporting you or your classmates, and you're on your own, you need to have the intelligence and the emotional wherewithal to help yourself through it, because that's why veterinary medicine is so well known for having the highest suicide addiction rate of all the professions. And when you consider the fact that there are, MDs that don't have the kind of problems we have in veterinary medicine, that's serious, and we need to take it seriously.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. So let's then go to your next step. If I'm not mistaken, you were the first African American woman to graduate from Ohio State University, correct?
No,
You were not.
I was not. No, no. I was the first Black woman to be president of the board, and as a matter of fact, possibly even on the board of the licensing board. And
Oh,
it
for the
was
state of
government
Ohio.
for the state of Ohio. But there were other Black students, few, but also women that were there, but I don't remember how many. There were only 2 of us. I was the one woman, and then there was a man who was also in my class, and I think 4 people from different Asian countries, and that was the extent of our diversity, racial diversity. And that was doing really well for considering the classes in front of us.
What was your class size back then?
120.
Wow, you had a big class size even back then.
Ohio State had one of the biggest groups, yeah.
Well, you also have the biggest football stadium, so that would make sense. Okay, so you graduate Ohio State and you went to go find a job. How did that all play out for you?
Not that well. I sent out over 100 resumes to my classmates, 0 to 2 or 3 at the most. I mean, people who were sending out 3 or 4 resumes thought that that was difficult. I could not get hired. People would even fly me out to, let's say I was flown to Chicago, Seattle, anyway, across the country. And when I got off the plane, they would tell me, "Oh, I'm so sorry, the job was filled, sorry. And we want to show you around and we'll show you the practice and all of that." But we hired someone and they paid for my flight out there. So, I have no qualms about that. One person actually called me from Philadelphia and said, "You were the best candidate. You're the candidate I wanted to hire, but I just can't do it because none of my clients will accept you. And I can't take that financial loss. So I just wanted you to know how highly I thought of you, but I'm not hiring you." And he went on because he says, "And I want you to know I'm Jewish. And so I know what it's like." He said, "But I just can't do it. Just can't do it." And I said, "Okay." So my graduation day came and went and I didn't have a job. I got a job because of one of my classmates that helped me out. So
And where was that first job?
in Medina, Ohio, which is where I still am.
And what kind of practice was it?
It was a small animal practice. I didn't stay long. And because, well, the reason that he hired me, it turned out, was because I'm Black and a woman, and he felt he didn't have to pay me well, which at that moment in time, he was right. I would have taken any job just to have a job. And I was started at $10,000 to $15,000 less per year than the lowest paid of my other classmates. And when it came to the second year, when I asked for a 10% raise, he said no. And I said, "Then I'm leaving." And he said, "You'll never find a job." And I had a classmate who was working at a dairy practice, and he talked to that veterinarian, and that veterinarian said, "Well, if she wants to work on a percentage, that's fine with me." And I said, "Okay." And I took the job. And he said, because he thought that I would have so few clients. He said that you'll never make a living, I don't think, here. It was an Amish area and a very farm area of the county. He said, "I'm going to give you 60% of everything that you bring in." And I said, "Okay."
Game on. Hold my beer. That's what I would have said.
And within 2 to 3 years, I was doing fine.
Okay, so you went and then decided to open your own practice at that point.
Yes.
How was that whole process?
Process for you.
It wasn't too bad. I found a bank that was really willing to work with me and was looking to diversify in terms of the people they were helping. So they were looking for small businesses, they were looking for women, and they were looking for people of color to help get started. So that was good. And at actually, the property that I was going to buy, which I thought was really perfect, turned out that the neighbors didn't want me there. Not because they didn't want a veterinary hospital, but when I asked for a change in the zoning, because it was commercial, but veterinary hospital wasn't listed on it, and they were kind of pushing back on that. And so I had to go to the zoning board, and my architect and my attorney came with me, my real estate agent came with me to the zoning meeting. And in the middle of the zoning meeting, the chair of the zoning department slammed his gavel down and said, "This meeting is adjourned." I mean, for no particular reason that any of us could tell. It was just in the middle of it. And we were talking about my case, so we knew it had to be related. But there was just nothing. We were all talking, and the next thing you know, the meeting was over. And so we left, and we kept saying, "What do you think happened?" And we all said we didn't know. Well, that night, one of the board members called me, and he said, "Linda, I want to tell you what happened, and I should not be telling you this, but I think you need to know that in the middle of the meeting, one of the board members passed a note to the chair of the board. And on the note, in writing, it said, 'I live next door to this property, and I am not going to have any N-word living next to me, and I am not going to approve this change because that's not going to happen.'" And so the chair stopped the meeting right then and there, and everybody left. So I got an attorney who said he'd take, because that was a real estate attorney, who said he'd take the case because I was going to take it. I said, "I'm taking it to court. We've got this handwritten note. We've got everything we need." And then the KKK was part of the area. Grand Wizard lived in this particular town. And so then they decided that they were going to have a little KKK march, which was not well attended, but they did their best. And so that was interesting. And then the papers got a hold of it. It became this very big thing with the Cleveland Plain Dealer and the Akron Beacon Journal. And in the end, the two board members left town rather than vote, so they didn't have a quorum at their next meeting. So it went on and on and on. In the end, however, somebody called in, I think from Florida, where he had gone, and he said, "I'll make the quorum, and I'm voting in favor." So I got the property, and 3 days later, I wrote them a letter and said I would never open a veterinary hospital in their town. And I went 1/4 of a mile down the road where the townships changed, and they had zoning that included a veterinary hospital, and I built it there.
Unbelievable. What, you know, and that was back in the early 80s, correct?
It was 90s.
It was in the 90s. Oh, wow. That makes it it wasn't good in the 80s, but that makes it even worse in the 90s. I remember how bad the KKK was in Illinois, in the suburbs of Chicago. As we discussed, I had a cross burned in my front yard being a Jewish guy. I didn't know that was in the 90s. I mean, yeah, I would, I don't even know why. I would have just fought it from court, but gone earlier. Good for you for then sticking it to him at the end. I hope that I, I don't even know what to say to something that was so ignorant as what was going on back then.
Yeah, and it was interesting. For the first, I'd say 4 years, I was calling the sheriff's department, not frequently, but every once in a while. And one time, my second year there, I had an apartment attached to the hospital, and I lived in that apartment because I couldn't afford a house at the time. And I was sound asleep, and there were lights all outside, and the door broke open, and the police came rushing in, and there I was in my pajamas. And then I said, "What?" And they said, "Oh, you're okay." I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We got a call, and somebody said you'd been murdered." And so
And
that's why they broke in. They thought I was dead. And they broke in. So I said, alrighty. So they said, well, we're putting a patrol out here. And they did. And they just, they drove by very frequently because of everything that was happening. And then slowly but surely, it took me a while to build a clientele because people came knowing I was Black, or people came in not knowing and then turned around and walked out. So,
Unbelievable. Well, that's funny you say that because I practiced by the name of Dr. G, and it was amazing how many Asian new clients I would get. One and done. One and done. So, but actually, but I also kept quite a few of them too. But it's just the way it is nowadays. You'll see a picture of your veterinarian you're going to see if you want it. If you dive deep enough. So my question then is, how did you remain compassionate to both clients, especially, and the profession after all this basically bullshit that was going on with you?
well, first of all, I had clients that were very compassionate and loyal to me. I have wonderful clients, wonderful, wonderful clients. And I enjoyed them. And it really made me feel good at the end of the day. And so it wasn't all doom and gloom. It was also joy and working through a lot of things. I did have people who thought I did a good job, but charged too much when I knew very well that I was undercharging for the local area, and most of the veterinary hospitals around me charged more. And it was a feeling of maybe I didn't deserve to charge as much as I did charge. And I knew where that came from. And so I just sort of let that slide. But as I said to my staff at one point, when we had some people that were returning to us after having treated, I'm going to say us, me, very badly, but they couldn't get the help that they needed. And everybody that they asked said, well, go to Dr. Randall. This is something that she's really good at. And I think that you should go there. And when they finally would come back, and my staff would say, are you really going to let them, after what they said and did, you're really going to let them in the door? I said, yeah. And their animal is going to be better for it. And I'm going to do a good job, which I would do for anybody. And that's the payback, for them, is that they are already coming back knowing what they did. They don't want to come to me, but they're feeling that they have to. And I'm going to
Yeah.
bend over backwards to make their experience. And sure, maybe it's a little bit of, I told you so. Maybe it's a little bit of that. But I decided early on that I was not going to stoop to that level, and I was going to do my best by whoever walked in that door, and sort of taking the high road, if you will. But I also had I had boundaries. I had to protect myself, and there were clients that I fired. I
Yeah.
wasn't going to take what they were doing.
Did you fire them quickly, or did you? Because that's a lot of a lot of times I think veterinarians wait way too long to get rid of a client.
A couple I fired quickly, but mostly I took way too long. But it got easier.
Especially towards the end of the career. Now, along this amazing path you're on, when did you receive, or when did you get the ABVP, American Board of Veterinary Practitioners specialty?
I opened the hospital. As a matter of fact, I'd say 6 years, perhaps, after I opened the hospital, I thought, well, now what can I do? And I thought, well, you've always wanted to be a specialist, and the ABVP started, and I started going to conferences and got involved in that process. And I thought, I can do this. And I did. And and then I kept it up for 25 years, I think. Um,
Wow.
so I did that, and I did companion animals. I also did exotics. I was well known especially as a reptile veterinarian. So I saw a lot of snakes, and we had one at the hospital, a 13-foot Burmese python. And so that was something that I was going to go back also and get and do the exotic animal ABVP, but I started it, but I never finished it, but I still did a lot of that.
So, with all your deep background, I mean, when it comes to emotional labor in this veterinary profession, if on a scale of 1 to 10, most people sit at a 9. You're at about a 37 with everything you had to put up with. What advice do you give young vets on managing difficult client interactions or emotionally challenging cases?
Well, I don't know that I'm a great one for giving advice on that, because I honestly don't think that I do it well. I feel that I struggle, and a lot of that has to do with my history that you've just heard, which is that I've spent a lifetime of either trying to be under the radar and not seen, so to speak, so that I was protecting myself from all the racism out there, and just either trying to be better so that nobody could tell me I wasn't good enough, or just literally trying not to be seen in the background somehow. It's not a healthy way to be. And I don't feel that I've ever really overcome a lifetime of that. So my advice often is to do your best to be ethical and be moral. And at the end of the day, to write down 2 lists. And one is really what you think you could have done better. And I say write it down so you can get it out of your system. Not because you're going to write it down and stare at it and dwell on, I could have done this better. But just by, and some people writing it down isn't the thing to do, but do something to get the things that you're going to lose sleep over out of just your mind. When it just sits in your mind, that's when it starts eating at you. So get it out.
Rumination's a huge problem.
Yep. So however it is, you can get those things out, just choose the big things and get it out of there. And then sit down and think of the 3 things that you're really proud of that you did that day. And I try to do this every single day, because if I don't, then I can easily be that person who's depressed, or I can easily think, what if I did this? What if I did that? I should have done this differently. And it's never ending. So I don't really have advice as much as I have a wish that people, young students, or people coming into a second profession that are coming into this profession, develop some boundaries and develop a way of dealing with the world and with themselves that is determined and self-loving. And it's hard to do that. And it's something that I think we always need to work with and to work at. So that's really the advice I have, is continue to build those skills, because if you don't, it's not a world that you're going to feel safe in.
It's not a profession you're going to survive either. You got to get it out of your mind as fast as possible.
Because we
So,
deal with that death and we deal with finances, creating a situation where we may not be able to help a particular animal. And that's what drives us to despair, because we're a helping profession.